Ichigo Kurosaki and Yuji Itadori. These two have much more in common than what you think.
Tastes good like soul food. Parked up outside in the old school. The new me back with the OU. The dog always finds his way back home, and it's so true.
Today we're back to comparing characters. This time around we're doing it with the protagonists of two of the biggest shonen of their respective generations. Jujutsu Kaisen's Yuji Itadori and Bleach's Ichigo Kurosaki. I think that, and the words of Gege confirm it, Yuji took a lot of inspiration in its characterization from Ichigo, just like Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole took a lot both from Naruto and Bleach. But before we dive deep down into this comparison, let's have a quick look at the characters in question. Ichigo lives a completely normal life, except for the fact that he can see ghosts, till Rukia comes in and revolutionizes his world. He learns about Soul Reapers, the Hollow, the Soul Society, and so on. And as we all know, he becomes a substitute Shinigami after being granted his powers by Rukia. Ichigo pushes through with determination, and strives to help those in need with his newly acquired strength and abilities. This strong will comes also from a trauma, the trauma of his mother's death, that branded him with grief and guilt since he's been, when he still was a kid, unable to protect her. Ichigo is very hard on himself, on his mistakes and his failures in general, hoping that he'll fix all of it with hard work and selflessness. And that is precisely the reason why, when Rukia is taken back to the Soul Society to be executed, he follows her back, along with his friends, determined to save her. Every time he comes face to face with bigger challenges, he learns something more about himself. Because with the words of Kendrick Lamar, he thought it was always him versus the world, until he found out it was him versus him. I take no credit for this comparison. Go check Hybe's video about it, it's a banger. By the way, the combination of his process of growth and self-understanding is the blade is me moment. One of the most impactful and relevant quotes in the entirety of Bleach. The moment when Ichigo realizes that he himself can be his most powerful weapon, but at the same time his biggest enemy. Yuji, on the other end, comes in almost 20 years later. He is once again a completely normal teenager, except for the fact that he has inhuman physical strength till Megumi comes into his life. And then, when Sukuna enters his body, a totally different story. He becomes part of the Jujutsu Society thanks to Gojo, that tries to protect him and teach him all he can learn about sorcery. With time he feels like he's becoming part of something bigger, fighting against Sukuna instead of himself, whilst fighting against curses stronger time after time. The first important moment of self-awareness of Yuji is the Amu moment. When fighting against Mahito, he understands that he's just a cog in the machine, as he reminds us later on. He's just playing his role to help in a way bigger war. Yuji is driven by something similar to Ichigo. He's trying to protect the people around him and do all his might to help, but not because of a straight up trauma. Initially just because his grandpa told him to surround himself with people so that he doesn't die alone. Then he grows affectionate of those around him, and playing his part becomes just the right thing to do. They both live in worlds built on evil, and they are part of the movement that tries to subvert it. They are both, in their own ways, anomalies in the system, one being a Ryoka, a menace to Soul Society in the first place, and a human, at least apparently, able to achieve Bankai, and in such a short period of time. And the other one being the only one able to serve as a vessel for Sukuna, without being totally controlled by him. And to go further with similarities, they both go under the inner demon trope, but for very different reasons. Ichigo's inner demon is sort of his true self, a force that he consistently tries to push back, unable to communicate with it and understand it. Yuji's one is a totally external one, on the other hand, the King of Curses, one of the strongest sorcerers in history, that hates him and reminds him pretty often. While at the end of the story, the inner demon serves for Ichigo as a reason to grow stronger and be finally self-aware of his capabilities. In Yuji's case, Sukuna unwillingly makes Yuji stronger with time by copying his curse techniques, but at the same time becomes the final antagonist, the menace to stop, and at the moment of recording this video, the fight is still raging on. Okay, so, as we said, They have lots in common, but there are still many differences in between the two of them. For example, the kind of mentor they have. I don't even know if we can say that Ichigo has a mentor properly, but if we had to say so, the role would be partly Urahara's and partly his father's. Urahara is a former captain, the most resourceful man in the entire world of Bleach, and one of the 5 word potentials, helping Ichigo regain his Shinigami powers after his first confrontation with Byakuya and Renji, and helping him train multiple times throughout the arcs of the story. But the closest thing Ichigo has to a mentor is his dad. In fact, Ichigo, strangely for a shonen MC, has an actual living, present and caring father. And with the story progressing, we actually learn that his father is not a simple guy, but used to be a captain too, and a member of one of the noble dynasties of Soul Society, the Shiba. Nonetheless, he's decided to let go of his role to save and then marry Masaki Kurosaki, a pure-blooded Quincy, now orphan of a family and rejected by the Ishida family she's been sort of adopted by. While in the early stages of the story, the father and son relationship seems to be purely based on comic interactions, as the story goes on, the relationship deepens way more, starting with a confrontation during the Memories in the Rain sequence, where Ishin tries to teach Ichigo to be less hard on himself and not to put the blame on himself for everything bad that happens to the people he cares about. And then Ishin is there for Ichigo in the most difficult moments, before fighting Aizen, to tell him about Final Getsuga, and before the final showdown against Yabak, to reveal the truth about his mother and his heritage. We could even say that Ichigo's biggest power shifts, being Mugetsu and the post-the blade is me Ichigo, are just thanks to his dad's interaction with him. On the other end, we have the Honored One, the man who shifted the balance of the entire sorcery world simply with his birth, the one and only Satoru Gojo. But before we talk about him, if you like this video so far, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Costs you nothing and helps a lot. Gojo is the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, with crazily complex and powerful curse techniques in the main, and he's pretty much feared because of this by the elders of Jujutsu Society. Gojo is himself sort of a revolutionary. He wants to subvert the current order and overturn the elders, who treat the Jujutsu Society and the sorcerers in general as mere tools to keep things as they are currently. Gojo's plan is to create a new generation of sorcerers in the hope of changing the world for the better. Gojo is, in fact, so strong that killing the higher-ups wouldn't be that much of a deal. But the younger Gojo experienced that violence and destruction only lead to chaos, and thus ends up searching for another way around the problem. The Jujutsu higher-ups keep preserving their privilege in a rotten and exploitative society, with no moral code or sense of real justice, and if Yuji is still alive, it's just thanks to Gojo. In the moment he adjusted Sukuna's finger, the elders wanted to execute him as a menace, and it's just because of Gojo's influence that things went differently. From there on, just like with Megumi, Gojo protected Yuji, treated him like a pupil, seeing in him a big potential and a kind and pure heart, a strong will to put himself on the line to fight for a better world. And Yuji sees in Gojo a guide, an inspirational figure to admire and try to eventually reach. Even though, as we said, Yuji humbles himself down way too many times, considering his role as that of a cog in the machine, always, here the similarity with Ichigo, putting the blame on himself for anything bad that happens, even when it's not entirely his fault. Think about his dialogue with Iguruma in his domain. Shibuya has been destroyed by Sukuna taking control over Yuji's body, but Yuji takes accountability for what happened, considering his weakness in resisting to Sukuna is the real cause of the incident. One thing that's really certain about the two of them is that they have a lot in common. They live in rotten worlds, they blame themselves a lot, and they fight to be better at what they do, but most of all to be better as single individuals. They feel like they must protect those in need and help the people around them, considering what they do to be never enough. Yuji took a lot from Ichigo. Ichigo's been a great inspiration for Yuji. And that's a beautiful case of emulation in narrative. One author that, taking inspiration from another, creates something entirely new through his ideas and the story he wants to tell, while also paying tribute to those who came before him. And we still don't know how JJK will end. But what I personally think is that Gege Akutami, working on acclaimed and affirmed models of the past, has created a freshly new classic of our present, through its protagonist, characters, and story. And you? What do you think about this comparison? Had you ever thought about it before? Do you think it works? Let me know in the comments down below. See you soon, guys.